a bit difficult to distinguish sometimes between climate, for example, and environmental change and normal variability. However, I'm convinced that there are changes in extreme events and in their impacts. These are partly due to socioeconomic development and generally development in regions such as the coast, for example, where impacts of climate phenomena are exacerbated by development. However, I believe that in the near future, in the not too distant future, we will be seeing an exacerbation and increase in those impacts due to changes, mainly climatic change, but also environmental consequences of actions. There are many types of challenges that we have to face in the next years. I believe the Mediterranean is a region where we have a very high concentration of people and assets in the coastal zone. So I believe these areas will see a large part of these changes and face a lot of challenges. So sea level rise, storminess, and impacts will concentrate a lot in coastal regions. Ecosystems will also need to respond to conditions that they have not experienced in the near past. And this will often come in combination with changes in other drivers. For example, we will probably see increased occurrence of compound extremes, as we call them, which is combinations of extreme events such as coastal flooding and rainfall flooding or river discharge, which may lead to higher changes and to higher impacts than we have observed in the past. There are other sectors or other areas where we will see impacts, and these will include, I believe, increased heat waves, increased numbers of heat waves and droughts, which seem to be where we seem to have an agreement of the science at the moment that they will increase in the Mediterranean. But we will also, and this will have impacts on other factors such as water security and events such as forest fires. Different hazards require different types of interventions, although there are synergies between different interventions. I believe that challenges such as, for example, heat waves and extreme heat events can be addressed better at local scales or community scales, and preparedness at this level will be essential. We have examples of, for example, emergency plans in other countries outside the Mediterranean in some cases, but also in Mediterranean type environments. We also have examples of cities like Barcelona that are increasing their percentage of green areas, which will hopefully reduce this urban heat effect and provide improved conditions during heat waves. We also have concrete actions in cities like Athens, for example, where in kind of easy measure is the establishment of places for people in the center of the city where people can go, particularly vulnerable groups, can go and cool down air-conditioned areas, for example. We need to address vulnerabilities. We need to see which people are most in need of help for these events and act so that we decrease this vulnerability. In terms of coastal protection, there are different types of measures that we can take. The Mediterranean coast is not very well prepared for sea level rise, for example, but there are cities, places that are developing, for example, adaptation and resilience toolkits where people are informed, they can take measures on a personal level. In some countries, state insurance is provided for people or for regions at risk of flooding, and of course planning such as installation of setback zones, which is actually prescribed by the Barcelona Convention and the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Protocol, is something that the implementation of which would help very much in reducing risk. There are several examples depending on several other examples depending on the application in terms of, for example, the usage of water and treatment of wastewater to address or reuse of wastewater to address water shortages. And of course, many of these examples can only apply to specific localities. So the measures that we can actually take to reduce risk differ from region to region. I think it's very important that we are prepared and act soon. It seems that for many of the hazards and risks that the Mediterranean will be facing, there is early adaptation will reduce impacts very much, and we need to start preparing as soon as possible so that we are, by the mid of the century at the latest, in a position to face those risks. There is a lot of work recently on nature-based adaptation, so on options that help with, that promote solutions that are based on natural processes to adapt, for example, to climate change. There is not very much happening in the Mediterranean, but this is possibly a way to go forward, as it will not only provide benefits for responding to the hazards, but also mitigating climate change.